When struggling to overcome anxiety of the chronic form or anxiety disorders, there are a lot of questions that come up. So today on episode 339 of The Anxious Truth, I'm going to answer a bunch of questions that were asked by members of the Disordered podcast community. So let's get to it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Anxious Truth. This is the podcast that covers all things anxiety, anxiety disorders, and anxiety recovery. If you are new here and you have just stumbled upon this episode by accident, welcome. I hope you find today's episode helpful in some way. And of course, if you're a returning listener or viewer on YouTube, hello, YouTube. Welcome back. Thanks for hanging out with me this week. We are going to answer common questions. Anxious people who are struggling with anxiety disorders, chronic forms of anxiety, who are trying to overcome that, especially if they are trying to make use of acceptance and mindfulness-based approaches like I talk about here and we talk about on the Disordered podcast, which you can find, by the way, at disordered.fm, often have many, many questions, and rightfully so. These are reasonable questions. They're not crazy questions. There are no crazy questions in this. So I asked members of the Disordered podcast community to suggest questions and topics for today's episode of The Anxious Truth, and they did. So I'm going to read a bunch of those questions and answer them as quickly as I can in about 20 or 25 minutes. Hopefully you will find your question among these, and if you haven't, maybe you can take some of those principles and apply them generally. If you would like to talk about what you hear today on this episode of The Anxious Truth, or interact with me or Josh Fletcher, my co-host on Disordered, or other people in the community that share your experience and are living this alongside you, you can do that in the Disordered community app. That is completely optional. We are not selling a cure. This is not a promise of panic to peace. There's nothing associated with freedom or being fixed or never being anxious again. If you just like to interact a little bit more with me and Josh and other people who are sharing your experience, you can do that in the community app, which you'll find at disordered.fm/community. I will put a link in the description of this YouTube video and this podcast episode. Again, you won't be missing anything if you don't join, but if you'd like to check it out, feel free to do that. So let's get to it. I'm going to answer some questions. Let's start from the beginning. One member of our community asks, when you really struggle to just let the symptoms be, and you can't really do what non-anxious me would do, am I the only one that has a problem and can't do that? And the answer to that is, of course, not the only one. So this particular person is really asking probably the biggest question in this topic, which is, okay, I get it. I'm supposed to just do nothing. Essentially, when I feel really anxious, I'm supposed to leave my symptoms alone. I'm supposed to leave my intrusive thoughts alone. I'm supposed to leave my fear and anxiety alone. So I can watch myself ride through the peak and learn from that I don't have to treat my body and mind as emergencies. I get it, but I can't do it. This is the number one question that gets asked all the time. If you could just hear me say, do that, and then just do that, well, this podcast, this YouTube channel will not exist. It's not that easy. I mean, I say all the time, it's a simple plan, but it's very hard to execute. Why? Because intentionally allowing yourself to be uncomfortable, to be afraid, to be anxious, to be disturbed or distressed intentionally without trying to fix it or get away from it or solve that particular problem, in air quotes, is counterintuitive. It doesn't make common sense. We are designed to avoid discomfort, not to go toward it. Even when we know we can learn from that discomfort, it is a big ask for any human being to go toward what they fear or to let it come at them without trying to take evasive action or fix it or regulate it or control it. I know it's a big ask. These approaches do have the best long-term outcomes. That's not even a question, but they are difficult to put your brain around. Even if you get it logically, it is very hard to choose to be uncomfortable, either intentionally trigger that or to just allow it when it gets naturally triggered without trying to fix it. Counterintuitive, doesn't make common sense, sort of goes against kind of our instincts, if you will. And it requires a brave, I will repeat that, a brave or courageous, informed leap of faith. That is 100% true. So if you're struggling, you hear me talk about these things, or you hear what we talk about on the Disordered podcast, and you're like, okay, I get it, but I can't seem to really do it because you're a little bit too scared right now. You're having a hard time accessing that courage. Doesn't feel exactly safe to do it. Totally get it. You get there when you get there. It's not just you, I promise. But excellent question, and probably the number one question that people ask me. I have another person who asked about exercise and anxiety. Can you, clearly you can't exercise your way out of anxiety. That is true. And this is coming from a total gym rat, right? I'm a huge exercise fan, love it, but you cannot exercise your way out of anxiety. But if exercise is done for the right reason, for example, not to fix anxiety, but just as part of a healthy lifestyle, then I imagine there are benefits. Could you dig into this a little bit? Sure can. This is an excellent question. In the Wayback Machine on The Anxious Truth many, many years ago, I did podcast episodes about exercise and anxiety, except I really talked about why people say, oh, I hear exercise is good for me. It's good for my anxiety, but it makes me more anxious. So if you go back, maybe I'll try to link those in the show notes today. You can listen to those. They're much older episodes, but that's one thing. But if you are, in fact, an exerciser, somebody who's active, whether it's outdoor exercise or you're a gym rat or whatever it is, totally fine. And you're exercising just to be healthy, which I think is a great plan. Like, everybody should treat their bodies well. I don't care whether you have anxiety or not. It's just a good plan. What are the benefits? Well, I think really there are two benefits here. The first one is the typical one that you hear all the time, which is exercise is a really great stress management tool. Now, for people who are dealing with chronic or disordered states of anxiety, stress management is a little bit iffy. Like, that general sort of stress management, wellness, well-being advice tends to kind of bounce off us like bullets off of Superman in that situation, because we're not really trying to manage stress or manage our well-being. We become afraid of the feelings that are associated with stress. So we kind of lose the plot a little bit there. But exercise is a really great stress management tool. It's a great overall wellness tool. It's a great overall health tool. And I would 100% agree that if you could build a base of general wellness and physical health, you are certainly have a leg up in the process. There's no doubt about that. Your exercise will not fix your anxiety disorder. It just won't. Sorry, movement people, but it does not fix an anxiety disorder, but it certainly contributes to you being a little bit healthy. And I think in that situation, when you get down to the later stages of recovery or desensitization, you may find that you are starting to look for general wellness or stress management tools, and exercise is a great one. Exercise is also a really great way to just do something nice for yourself. Anxious people tend to stop doing nice things for themselves because they spend all of their time inwardly focused, trying to figure out and fix how they feel and what they're thinking. Taking a risk to just do something purely for the sake of doing something good for yourself, because that is allowed and encouraged, is another benefit of regular exercise. And finally, I think another benefit of exercise, if you're an anxious person, is that it is a form of interoceptive exposure. So for many people, if they try to exercise, it makes them more anxious because it brings up physical sensations that sort of feel like anxiety or panic, and then they get scared and then they stop. So interoceptive exposure is what people like me, therapists, use to intentionally create the physical sensations and symptoms of anxiety in a controlled way and a planned way so that you can get used to feeling those things. So if you go to the gym and jump on the stair machine or the treadmill and get your heart rate way up, you're gonna maybe freak out. But if you can learn to sort of stop and let that freak out peak and fall, you just did an interoceptive exposure. You just have to kind of know why you're doing that and understand that. I will try to put some links in the show notes that describe or show interoceptive exposure so you can get a hang for that, or at least what it looks like. But yeah, one benefit of exercise is that it can be a good form of interoceptive work for sure. So excellent question. I had two people asking about perfectionism. Now, perfectionism is its own topic. Perfectionism drives a lot of anxiety, right? But specifically, I want to talk about perfectionism in the recovery or desensitization process. Many people, and Josh and I on the Disordered podcast, which again, you'll find at disordered.fm, we did an episode on compulsive recovery. Again, I'll try to link that in the show notes if I can, if I remember. Many people will get to the point where they become paralyzed in the recovery or desensitization process because they are so afraid of getting it wrong. So perfectionism kind of feels like, yeah, I want to make sure I'm optimizing it. There are two sides of that. I need to make sure that I'm constantly optimizing my anxiety recovery, my desensitization. I want every variable nailed down. I want to understand everything perfectly. I'm going to get it absolutely right and do it the best I possibly can. That's one side of perfectionism. The other side is I am terrified that I will do it wrong and imperfect, and therefore I will ruin my life. Do you see how extreme both of those things are? So perfectionism is really a very extreme approach to recovery. Now, when I wrote The Anxious Truth, which is that you can find that on my website. If you go to theanxioustruth.com, you'll find the books that I've written. I wrote the line, recovery is life, but life is recovery. So I would urge you, if you have a very perfectionistic view of the recovery or desensitization process, to consider that the best way to get better is to live your life as best you can under the current circumstances and learn from that. But that is by design ugly. If you're really anxious, if you're really unsure, if you're really afraid, if you're really uncomfortably, physically, emotionally, mentally, and you're trying to just do your life while you bring that with you, which is what we're talking about here all the time, you can learn from that. But you have to accept that that's going to look suboptimal. That's not going to look perfect. It's going to look messy. You might do better with some days or others. You might do better some hours or others, but that's okay. So boil it down to the simplest principles. Do what non-anxious you would do. Drop the resistance, work through the peak of the difficult experiences, challenge the beliefs that you must save yourself or protect yourself from those feelings or thoughts, and try to do that while you do life. Now, we will do exposures, which are sort of artificially, triggering things that might not necessarily look like your daily life, but do the best you can to just live your life while you bring those things with you, and you can learn from that. You cannot get this wrong if you just boil it down to that. I am either winning in an experience or I am learning from this experience. That's it. There is no optimal recovery. There is no way to optimize it. There is no person who knows all the things so they get it right. There is nobody who doesn't make any mistakes. There is nobody who rests and then doesn't find out that they actually avoided. Totally fine. You can learn from that. There isn't anybody who pushes them to not avoid and then finds out the next day they probably should have rested. So that mistake can go both ways. So in the end, you are working on learning to be better at experiencing discomfort. And you're going to have to also learn to experience and work through the discomfort of what if this isn't perfect, or what if I just made a mistake? There is no perfect recovery. I cannot say it enough. There's no perfect or optimized desensitization. It's going to look different for every person. It's going to look different for you from day to day. And there is no way to collapse the whole process because you missed something on a podcast or a TikTok or a YouTube video, or you didn't read a book that you thought you were supposed to read, or you somehow got it wrong and you accidentally avoided, or kind of retreated or made anxiety too important today. You cannot ruin that process. Just always be aware of what it is you're trying to learn. That's why I say all the time that I hate calling this a healing process. And I think when Josh, my co-host in Disordered, says he doesn't like the word recovery anymore, I am starting to get on board with him more and more and more, because that implies that you reach some sort of end state. But that's not true. You just become desensitized to the process of like, oh my God, my body and mind are emergencies. So that's the only principle you care about, or you should care about. So perfectionism in recovery is a real problem that makes it harder for a lot of people. See if some of the things that I've mentioned today ring a bell. So I'm sorry you're hearing all of those notifications. Those are actually notifications in the Disordered Community app. So another question, which is really good, which is, why does anxiety sort of feel like Stockholm Syndrome? And I love that that person uses that. Well, we hate this and we want to not have the symptoms and the thoughts, and we want to get better, but also we are really scared of what it will look like without that. This is another very common, although very unique and subjective experience, because everybody has their own reasons for sort of fearing desensitization or fearing going back to normal life or getting rid of anxiety, although we're not getting rid of anxiety. You know what I mean? There are many people who really want it, but also at the same time are kind of terrified. There's a zillion different reasons why that happens, why it feels like, well, what happens if I don't have this anymore? Number one, it does leave a hole. When I got better, I used to think, well, I just lost my job as a full-time anxious person, and I wasn't sure what to fill that space with. So it was a little bit unnerving for sure. And you just slowly start to experiment with going back to life, your old interests or exploring new interests. Some people feel like it's at least familiar if I know how I'm going to live every day, and that is a restricted, sort of retreated kind of thing, full of I can't do too much because of my anxiety. That can become comfortable and familiar, and it's hard to shake that up, right? We don't want to upset that apple cart. There are certain situations where you start to get better, and maybe you're in a interpersonal dynamic, whether it's more than one person or in a romantic or intimate relationship, where as you start to get better, things start to get worse in your relationship. That actually can happen sometimes. That is a reason why people sometimes put on the brakes. And I think especially with GAD and OCD, a lot of people will say yes, because they think that overthinking and worrying and ruminating or following OCD is protective, makes them a better person or protects them. if I get over this, then who will I be without that? Because while I want to get over this is also a good thing. So think about that. If you see your OCD or your GAD as actually good things, but then you also want to get over them, they're not good things. Spoiler alert, GAD is not a good thing. It does not help you. It does not make you a better problem solver. It does not make you a more loving parent. It does not make you a better partner or employee. It doesn't make you a high achiever. It makes you none of those things. OCD doesn't protect you. OCD doesn't make you the person you hope to be. OCD ruins your life. So that's another reason why sometimes it feels like anxiety has us stuck in a little bit of like Stockholm Syndrome, which I kind of dig that. Hopefully that helps. I can do, we'll do another couple of questions, maybe, if I can get to them, and then we'll do more, I'll do more of these in future episodes, but, let's look at this one, which I think there's two more. One is a question about pure O, like pure O OCD. Pure O is where we can't really see behavioral compulsions or physical compulsions. It's almost entirely mental. It's driven by thoughts that are very anxious. These are obsessive thoughts, or they're very troublesome thoughts. And then they drive mental compulsions in order to try to calm down. Things like checking or scanning or arguing with the thoughts or repetitively counting or reciting song lyrics or repetitively praying or reviewing past events. That's what pure O looks like. This person asks, when do you shut the door on ruminative thoughts? And when do you allow your brain to be messy and noisy? And the answer to that is kind of simple. You cannot shut the door on your thoughts. No part of OCD recovery or GAD, if we're looking about GAD, is about shutting the door on that. What you can do, just to clarify that, is many people think that they are trying to learn to shut those thoughts off or shut them out so you don't hear them. You will always hear them. You have to hear your thoughts. If you didn't hear your thoughts, something would be wrong, right? So your brain is always going to be messy and noisy. The question is, do I need to interact with that? So if you think of the door metaphor that this person has used, which I think is great, when do you shut the door? And I think, by the way, Josh said that last week on a podcast episode or a live in the community app. I think if you look at it as shutting the door as a metaphor, like, okay, I'm in this room and all of my difficult stuff is in the other room. Should I shut the door? Well, you can't shut the door because you're always going to know what's going on in the other room. You can't unhear it or unsee it. But what you can decide to do is hear all the messy, noisy stuff in the anxiety room while you're over here, but you could choose to not go in that room. Now, that noisy, messy stuff feels important and urgent and like it should be interacted with. And it'll be like, come on, come in the anxiety room. Come on, come on, come on. And you're going to want to, I should go in there to be safer or to solve this. But no, I'm not going to go in that room. I'm not going to go in there. I'm just going to hear that noisy, ruckus, like chaotic mess going on. And I'm not going to go in that room and talk about it. So you always have to let your brain be messy and noisy because that's what brains do. Just that people who do not have things like OCD or generalized anxiety disorder are kind of like, maybe they don't like it. It makes them a little bit crazy, but they don't treat that noisy, messy brain as an urgent thing or an emergency. Right? So hopefully that helps. All right, let's do one more question and then I got to end the episode. So this person asked, on the good days where there's not much lingering anxiety, is it better to bask in the comfort and relaxation or push yourself to be anxious and teach Craig, that's Craig the critic, our inner critic that we talked about on Disordered, a lesson? It's a beautiful thing to have a few days of fresh air. Sure is. I'm all for that, right? But I always have that enjoy it while you can thought pop in when I consider doing exposures like I promised I would if I start to feel better. So here is what I want to highlight in that question. If I'm having a few good days, should I just have those days? Or should I, but I said that when I would feel better, I would do exposures. No, like if you're having a few good days, then have the few good days. Let the, it's going to come back thoughts come and go. Let the, what if I get anxious later, because you may be having that, come and go. The catastrophic or like fatalistic thoughts of it's just going to come back anyway. So what's the point? If you have an opportunity to live your life, remember what I said earlier on in the episode, then do the best you can to live it. Like, that's okay. Just go back to trying to live your life as best as you can. And notice how anxiety wants to kind of pull you back in. Like, I'm coming back. Don't bother. I'm just going to show up tomorrow anyway. Notice that, but keep going. Right? It's important. Now, maybe it comes back tomorrow. Maybe it doesn't. We don't know. But remember, we are not trying to make it go away forever. We are trying to learn that all states are permissible. If I'm having a good day, that is allowed, even though my mind is going to catastrophize over when this good day is going to end or if it's going to come back and bite me in the butt. What we don't want to do is make part of our framework that when we start to feel better, then we will challenge the anxiety. we need to challenge the anxiety on the days when we're not feeling better. Remember, you cannot rewrite that fear blueprint. We cannot retrain the amygdala, if you will, which is not entirely accurate, but whatever. We cannot like undo those blueprints unless we unroll them. You have to open up the threat response. You have to open up the fear response in order to interact with it. So we can't wait for good days to start to do exposures. If you're doing your exposures or challenging your anxiety or trying to do what non-anxious you would do on the bad days, then when you have good days, take them, right? Take them. So I think that's really important. Good days versus bad days become a lot less of a critical distinction to make when you are actually challenging the, no, I need to retreat and fix this on the bad days. So do the work on the tough days, the difficult, the challenging days, because honestly, those are the days where you learn the lessons. If you wait until you're having a really great day with no anxiety and go do the thing you think is too scary, then great. I'm happy that you had a good day, but really, what did you learn about that? So anyway, we did a lot in about 25 minutes here, which I think is really great. There's some more questions that I will revisit some other time. And I will try to answer all of the questions that the community asked in the community, right? So there's definitely much more interaction there. I tend to go live 1 or 2 times a week. Josh and I do it together. So there's a lot more interaction there. Again, you do not have to jump into that community to get better. I promise. Just keep listening to this podcast, take advantage of all the free stuff. But these questions did come from the Disordered podcast community, which you will find at disordered.fm/community if you want to check it out. So hopefully some of the questions that I asked today, or that I responded to today, because they're very general in nature, will have resonated for you, even though you didn't probably ask the question. And hopefully you can take some of the principles out of that you really need. If you're listening or watching as a YouTube video, hello again, YouTube. We're back with video this week. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload more stuff. It helps me because then YouTube knows that you like when I do this, so they don't just bury me in favor of silly stuff on YouTube. So thanks for that if you do it. And of course, as always, I will remind you as I wrap it up that if you take anything out of today's podcast episode, any lesson at all, and you try to use that and apply that in the real world while you're really anxious and trying to learn that you can handle that and you don't have to retreat from that or re-engineer your entire life around it, then you are winning. This is a game of small steps repeated over and over and built on top of each other. So there's no aha moment where you suddenly go from an anxious person to a better person. These things happen little by little, and there are no small insignificant steps. They all count. Wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think that was true. So thanks for listening. I appreciate you hanging out this week or watching. I will be back again in 2 weeks with another topic. Don't know what that is. I will try to remember to put all the links to everything I talked about in the YouTube description or the podcast show notes or on my website. So check those out if you want to. I will see you in 2 weeks. We're out.